Excellent. Well, welcome everybody. I want to call this meeting to order of the Cumberland County Finance Committee on Wednesday, September 21st, 2022 at approximately 5:07 p.m. 5:07 p.m. First, it's good to be in person. Appreciate being here, and although Zoom has carried us this far, it's good to officially be in person. I want to be able to just go around. I know there's some new faces here, so if we could, we'll do quick introductions. If you would, state your name, if comfortable, state pronouns, and then where or what you're representing at this time. We'll start to my right here.
Hi, my name is Amy Jennings. I'm the HR Director for Cumberland County.
I'm Susan Wittonis. I'm the legal commissioner for District 2.
Dustin Ward, representing New Gloucester, and pronouns he, him.
Hi, I'm Paul Turog, and I am here from Bridgeton.
Lee Pratt, I am the chair of the Gorham Town Council.
Kate Snyder, Mayor of Portland.
Bill Truppen, Facilities Director for Cumberland County.
Bob Vale, Cumberland, Town of Cumberland, from Cumberland County, Town Council.
Alex Kimball, Deputy Manager of Finance and Administration for Cumberland County.
And Jim Gailey, County Manager for Cumberland County.
Excellent. I know we are waiting on two more individuals who we expected to be here, and so if and when they show, we'll definitely enter them in. I'll ask any public comments that were received that we need to read at this time.
None.
All right, seeing none, I'll hand it over to you both to go ahead and lead us through these presentations.
Terrific. Well, as it is custom, the first meeting of the Finance Committee each year, we have established a quick PowerPoint giving kind of a 30,000-foot view of both budgets. This year is a very unique year in that we are switching from a calendar year general fund budget to a fiscal year general fund budget, which all intents and purposes, it means we go from a January to December budget to a July to June. We do already have two budgets, the cross-insurance arena budget and the jail budget are on the July to June cycle. Moving the general fund budget will just make it a whole lot easier for us to figure it all out on an annual basis. So we appreciate the opportunity to do this, and thank you for your time because it's really two budgets. We got a 6-month budget from January to June of 2023, and then our first fiscal year budget from July to June 2024. So I will jump right in. First budget we have this evening is the 2023.5. That's what we are calling the first 6 months of 2023. And as this slide shows, usually you start seeing Excel spreadsheets comparing one year to the next. That's not really all that doable when you create a 6-month budget and trying to compare it to a year budget that we're in. So like I say in this slide, it's apples to oranges, and you'll see why. But just some quick hits on the 6-month budget. We are proposing a 2.5% COLA for the non-union come January of 2023. We're estimating at this time an 8% health insurance increase. We will have a more refined number on that come probably the end of October, I think our meeting is. I sit on the Health Trust, and so I believe our meeting is towards the end of October. So we'll have our firm number going into our November meeting. We have a TAN loan, which is a tax anticipation note. Usually that's in the hundreds of thousands. Right now, for the 6-month budget, we're at $41,000, and that is for just the administration and the fees associated with pulling a TAN. That does not include any principal or interest, and you'll see that in the full year budget. Non-debt capital is just under $170,000. There are new positions within the 6-month budget, and we have inserted $200,000 out of the tax stabilization account to bring the percentage down. Under the total expenditures, county expenses are going to be just under $11,900,000. Jail expenses are just over $11,200,000. The cross-insurance arena is just under $860,000, with the total expenses being just under $23,700,000. As you can see, I tried to show you the comparison on the adopted 22 budget And there's it's really apples to oranges. And if we were to compare the two, the 6-month budget is down 51.44% to the full year budget. Getting into the needs from taxes, again, it's a very similar percentage change because going from a full year to a half year, but we would be needing $17,200,000 for needs from taxes. I should pause here and just relay on to, many of you have probably at the council level made the decision at the council on how you would like to handle this 6-month budget. There are some communities that are paying it year one. There are some communities that are spreading the payments over 5 years, interest-free. So that's how the 6-month budget will be handled, and that needs from taxes of the $17 million. When it comes to debt, capital, and the tax anticipation note for the 6-month budget, we're just under $500,000. With debt principal being $230, bond being just under $56,000. Capital reserve, like I previously said, is just under $170,000, and the tax anticipation note is $41,000. We are funding a few projects under our human services and grants budget, only because they have operational costs built into their application. And so we have split their annual amounts in half for the 6-month budget. So the Cumberland County Soil and Water District, which typically for a year gets $18,000, we're allocating $9,000 for the 6 months. The Cumberland County Extension Service will get $60,000 because the year budget is proposing $120,000. The Tedford Shelter, the homeless shelter in Brunswick, gets an allocation of $15,000 on an annual basis, and we're proposing an $8,000 contribution the first 6 months of 2023, for a total of $77,000. Non-debt at $170 again. Here is our schedule for how we will handle the tax stabilization reserve. As you see, $200,000 will be used, and then the schedule moving forward so that we wean ourselves off the tax stabilization reserve without a huge cliff. And that, in summary, concludes the 6-month budget. We'll jump into the 2023-24 manager's budget.
Dustin, can we ask any questions?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
certainly. Please do.
Jim, I want to pull my hair out every time I see this. Why is the health insurance up 8%? It just isn't right. And, you look at cost of living adjustment, but health insurance, it's tracking way over what it ought to be year after year after year.
Yeah, we have, over the last 3 to 4 years, I would say that our health insurance costs have been somewhere between 2 and 5%. This year, we're seeing our quarterly mod rates up over 100%, so they've been up in the 120s, 130s. That's on the wrong side of the mod rate where you want to be. And sitting on the health trust, I see what health insurance is across the board, across all municipalities in the state who use Maine Municipal Employees Health Trust. And what we're seeing is that we saw a lot of low numbers during the pandemic because it was hard to get into your physician. People were opting not to put themselves in that type of environment. And the health trust wasn't seeing the claims being processed like we had pre-pandemic. Well, now we're coming out of the pandemic and people are now getting into their primary care doctor or their specialist, and we're seeing health care costs creep up. And when those health care costs creep up, that equates to a higher percentage rate and need to assess a higher percentage rate for those communities that are on the high end. We estimate 8%. We can fine tune that when we find out towards the end of October, 1st of November. So maybe on the November 9th meeting, we come to you and say, hey, we got lucky. We're at 5.5% this year. We'll ratchet that down. So there's still time, but to build the budget right now, we're being more on,
You're just a carry number.
it's a carry number, yes.
Yeah, any other questions? Seeing none.
Jump in, and
Yeah.
feel free to jump in at any questions along the way. This budget's a little bit more, a little more lengthy, because it's the full year budget. Couple of budget themes going into this year, and this year meaning July 1st to June 30th of 2024. Salaries, we have to keep up with market and the ability to hire and retain our employees, much like you have those conversations within your own town halls. Health insurance, we've touched upon that. Tax stabilization, the use of fund balance to get down the tax rate. And then post-pandemic, there's a number of line items within the budgets that are itching their way back up to pre-pandemic numbers. Trainings are now back in full swing, national conferences, travel, things like that. All those savings that we took the last 2 years because we just weren't going anywhere, now it's all coming back. And so those are just a few that we have going back to pre-pandemic line items. Some budget highlights. July 1st next year, we're proposing a non-union COLA of 5%. Health insurance, we're estimated then at 5%. We do have one new position, and that position is a FOIA clerk in the sheriff's office, where the sheriff is currently working with the county commissioners on implementation of body cams and dash cams. We do not have either in the sheriff's office right now, and the sheriff has been able to get some of federal funds through Senator Collins' office to pay for at least the first year or two of implementation costs. But it will take a individual to manage the FOIA requests for those videos. Tax anticipation note will increase by $30,000, and you'll see that at a later slide. We do have a capital bond being proposed in this, just over $3.8 million, and we'll talk a little more in the slide. Non-debt capital is just under $280,000. We're inserting $200,000 of tax stabilization funds, and the tax rate impact of this one-year budget is 5.91%. Current expenditures as compared to the adopted budget of 2022. County expenses are up just under 1.9 million. Jail expenses just under 900,000. Across insurance arena, just under 150,000. For a total expenses of 51,684,698, or up 5.99%. You start factoring in enterprise funds and grants. That total expenditure is $67,480,198, or a percentage change of 6.54%. Diving a little bit into the jail expenses and revenue moving forward, we are looking at state funding being flat. We're losing a little bit, or proposing to lose a little bit on federal border, which is going to be something that we're going to keep our eye on, because currently, over the last couple of weeks, we have lost all of our federal borders out of the jail for various reasons. And so this is something that we're hoping that once we make some changes down at the jail over the next couple of weeks, those federal borders will be coming back. At this point, we are being optimistic in this budget. County borders, we are proposing a $250,000 loss on county borders because we are working with the County of York on shifting inmates back and forth versus assuming inmates from the County of York, which was around 35 to 40 that we would on an annual basis. Now we're trying to close pods, they're trying to close pods, so we're being creative, and it's almost a wash. So we've eliminated $250,000 in revenue. Other jail revenues down $25,000 for a loss of $400,000 in jail revenue line. Jail expenses are up $190,603. So you bring it all down with the loss and the with the loss of revenue and up in expenses, we're at $590,603, and that is right at that 4% level for tax increase for jails as per state statute.
What is the actual number for the jail expenses for 2021-22? I mean, these are budget-to-budget numbers, and I understand the whole 4% and why you need to do that. Well, what is the actual number?
Yeah, for 21-22, where it ended up landing, and this is similar to what we talked about back when we did the update in the summer. Expenses came in well under budget. Revenues came in somewhat under budget, which definitely, and resulted in a net gain for that fund. And it was pretty big dollars off. And that has everything to do with being so far down on employees. What we are now starting to see as we move into 22-23 budget is those revenues are now crashing down along with the expenses, right? Because last year, yes, the expenses went way down and came in well under budget, but we hadn't lost all of our federal borders yet. Now that, $2.5 million revenue line is at a zero right now. So we're still struggling with the fact, and this comes back to that discussion of the jail budget is going to need a major overhaul as we move forward here, where either A, we get closer to full employment and it starts running more like what we've actually got in the budgets here, which are based on full employment, or we accept that we have to have a smaller jail with less functions and everything's going to come backwards. However, what's going to occur is all those dials are going to change all at the same time. Our revenues are going to come down, our expenses are going to come down. That need for taxes is, we'll do our best to find a way to at least keep that stable, but that's the big lift that we've all got coming up around the corner here of what kind of a jail are we going to have in the very, very near future here. And some might say, what kind of jail are we going to have today? Because we're definitely in a daily crisis there.
Mechanically, what has happened with the funding that was raised and then not spent?
Oh.
Forgetting the go forward and the look forward, is that all earmarked for specific to jail expenses, or is that flowing into a general fund, or where is all that money?
Technically speaking, it stays in the general fund because the jail and the general fund are all one and the same. However, the jail budgets that we're baking into it are baking in us using some of that fund balance back if things go in there. We're very much, yeah.
Okay.
Clearly, that gain has to come back. It's also enabling us to expand the tax stabilization fund for these ones. Again, absolutely, that's going to come right back into it. We just really want to be careful to not create a cliff for ourselves. That's our, yes, we'll absolutely try to get that back down, but we've got to then find a way to wean ourselves off from that without kicking the can a year down the road, which is part of why we're talking really seriously about that jail budget where all the numbers come down. But yes, absolutely, that's why both of those years have that use of that fund balance right back out.
Thank you.
Are we benchmarking against the rest of the state and their jails, or out of state? Or is this specific to Cumberland County?
A little of both. So numbers for inmates at county jails statewide have decreased over the past couple of years, but down here in southern Maine and in Cumberland in particular, it's decreased much more sharply than a lot of the other places. And a large part of that has been us being very aggressive for a variety of reasons of reducing that jail population as much as possible, partially due to COVID, partially due to policy changes and partially due to that extreme lack of staffing where they've been having to not necessarily accept new inmates that they otherwise might be doing.
All
So it's gonna-
monitoring and that sort of thing.
Anytime monitoring is available, they're always gonna take it, realistically speaking. That's something that,
Is
that's
that-
been in place for a long time. Maine Pretrial Services, the organization that really runs that for us. And anytime they give a presentation, it's always very eye-opening because the tax dollars that they save for us by the dollars we spend to them, send to them, for them to set up that monitoring, to keep the people out while awaiting, it's extraordinary how helpful it is. But we've kind of already turned that dial as far as we can turn it. There's not much more we can go. There's not, you can only expand that so far before you start getting into people who really truly need to be in that jail. And that's what we're down to now.
Yeah, Mayor Snyder, go
I have
ahead.
a couple of questions. So how many, if you're fully staffed at the jail, how many employees is that?
124 corrections officers.
Corrections officer, 184 total.
And do you know how many we have now?
120 right now.
120 total?
Yeah.
And COs, how many, if we want 124, do you have any idea where we are in terms of that number now?
I believe we are in the 60s right now.
60s. And are the federal borders not coming because we don't have the staff to cover the need? That's right, okay, so that's attributable to that. When do you expect to know, so forgive me, the half-year budget, is it gonna start on January 1? Okay, so at what point do you make the call on the budget heading into those 6 months?
Interestingly enough, that budget was already passed back July 1st, 2022. So the
That's
first
right,
6
okay,
months,
okay.
it's already,
Okay, so this is already approved, you're just you're going with it,
the jail budget
okay,
portion of it
Got
was
it.
approved back in there because it's on that fiscal year.
And cross insurance.
okay, got it,
It's a
thank you.
big part of why we really want to do this, because it's kind of rough having
Got it,
6 months off. Yeah.
okay, that's helpful, thank you. And then what's the date for knowing with the FY '24 budget that starts on July 1? Like, when will you make the call in terms of what we're budgeting for versus what we hope for?
This spring.
Okay. Okay, and then, the state funding, is that just written into legislation, or does that require legislative approval for the FY '24 budget?
The legislation enables us to do up to a 4%
Got it.
tax increase. There is no mechanism for us to exceed it.
Okay,
There's not a referendum vote
got it.
or anything like that. It's unlike LD one on that respect.
Okay.
It's just a hard cap.
Got it.
The newest version of the legislation does enable special requests to exceed that cap at certain specific points in time. And so if that legislation goes into effect, that would be something that you might see some counties going through that process, but that's still in the works up in Augusta.
Got it, okay. My last question at this moment is, I was at an event last week with the sheriff who talked about the request to the governor with regard to the National Guard and getting more staff resources at the jail. Do you have any news on that front? Thanks.
Other questions?
All right, we'll continue. Jumping into the cross insurance arena for 23-24, bond and principal and interest will be up just over $7,000. Prior debt is going down just over $25,000. Capital, we are proposing a project of $80,000 for the replacement of the sound system within the arena. And the operations is gonna be up just under $86,000 for a total impact of just under $148,000.
What was driving that operational number? Is it more events or just more expenses?
Go for that.
Cross-insurance operational
650.
number?
Yeah.
Yeah, a big part of it is, yes, it's been busier, but they're having to spend a ton more for everything. So that same chase that we're always having with cross-insurance arena of getting to that place where they are truly turning that profit. Now, granted, they actually got there or very, very close to there this past year. But I think what we saw from Mike LeCoq was, here's what happens when everything goes great and the place gets filled to the brim with people who are spending like crazy, and here's where we get, even though it's clearly everyone going there. Maybe that same level of people attending keeps occurring, and maybe people keep spending as much per capita. It feels like a very dangerous bet to take, to think that post-COVID surge is going to keep going. So I think that's the best I can do on that. I might have missed something.
Well, just this morning, we had a cross-insurance arena trustees meeting, and a lot of positive views for the next 6 months in terms of acts being brought in. There's a number of acts that are looking at 2-night acts, comedy shows. A number of them are heading out on the road, so we haven't locked them down, but they're out there. They've contacted the arena. They're interested, and so, you know, we foresee us having another year, much like we had last year, where the fall was somewhat slow. Though we just brought in WWE wrestling, which will pack the arena. That's always a fan favorite. So then that will happen in November. But it will look from a February to May is going to be another busy season, and that's what really bailed us out of putting us in the black this past year was February to May, and hockey team was going strong. They had playoff games that weren't budgeted for because you never know. And we had a full calendar of events. And it's shaping up to be just like that. And so all fingers are crossed. As in comparison, I think you remember back in July, when we built last year's budget, we were estimating about $960,000 deficit. And we turned that around and came in with a $36,000 profit on the budget. This year, the deficit is estimated at $580,000, and just in July, we've spun that down to about $440,000. So we still have 11 months to get that $440,000 to the good. So we're just keeping our fingers crossed that we have another year like 2021, 22.
I think the big part for us is, at what point in time, and boy, it'd be great if this is it, if this becomes the new normal, great. But at what point in time do we start feeling like we can trust that? That's the big scare here. And what I always come back to is, I remember reading this book, and I'm gonna go way afield, sorry everyone. Reading this book called 1927. It was this historical book about 1927, and one of the things that the author kept talking about was how all through the 1920s, following the Spanish flu epidemic, funny thing kept happening, especially in the major cities, where people would flock in giant droves to everything. So Lindbergh, baseball games, you name it, they just seemed to, even years later, want to congregate. And I always thought, like, coming out of COVID, is that gonna happen to us? But how long is it gonna last? So, okay, sorry, I went afield.
Well, look at us right here.
So now we'll get into total needs from taxes for 23-24. County is up just over 1.3 million. The jail at their 4% is just under 600,000. Cross insurance arena just under 150,000. For a total needs from taxes of just under $2.1 million, or 5.91%. Okay. Jumping into the debt, capital, and tax anticipation note, we're going up $45,500 in principal, down in interest of just under $27,000. Capital reserve will be going down in comparison to the 2022 budget of $61,000. Tax anticipation note, due to the interest rates that are on the rise, we're needing to bump that up, hopefully enough, as proposed here, by $30,000. So this is one line that, by changing our calendar year to a fiscal year and better having cash flow all 12 months, this line will start going down next year. And it will evaporate after year 5. And so that's one positive of doing this budget year shift. But for this year, we're gonna have to take it on the chin a little bit and bump it up to $191,000. So in totality, we're down in this category just over $12,000. Human Services and Grants, looking at it for the full year, Portland Public Library is given $10,000. We got our Soil and Water District at $18,000. Cumberland County Extension Service will be allocated at $120,000. Tedford Shelter at $15,000. And then we, a number of years ago, merged a number of contributions to smaller nonprofits within the region and made one contribution to Thrive 2027 to handle that and bring more accountability into how nonprofits were going to spend the county's funds. So with that all said, compared to the current 2022 budget, we are down $12,000 at $263,000, or a negative 4.36%.
What is Cumberland County Extension Service?
That is, they do like Master Gardener Program, the 4-H Club. They help farmers throughout the county with their crops and different trends. Capital bond, we're proposing $3.8 million in capital bond. The time has come that we need to address the roof at the jail. We have put this project off for probably the last 4 years. And Bill is telling us that we need to start paying some attention to it. So $1.7 million allocated for that. Again, at the jail, exterior repointing of the brickwork to preserve the exterior of that building at $275,000. One thing that jumped out at us last minute was that we were going to need to change out all the cell door locks. This has been problematic for us for a number of years, and the Facilities Department has put this on life support and constantly calling the vendor out of Alabama to work on this old system. However, we are going through the design process right now for an expansion onto the jail for a medical wing that will be paid for through opera funds. And through that expansion, we need to implement a lock system. Well, we can't implement the dinosaur lock system that we have in the jail today, and so we need to change out the entire jail's lock system so that it not only does the new medical wing, but it also is one single control board for the entire jail complex. That's at $1.2 million. We have our parking garage right across the street here needing substantial repairs. Bill has gone through an engineering study, and they've laid out what it will cost us over X amount of time. Well, year 1 and 2 contribution is just under $490,000 worth of repairs to that garage. And then we need a fire alarm system within this building. Just a few months ago, we were touch and go whether we were going to be able to occupy this building because the fire alarm system, was it the audible side of things? The audible portion of the fire alarm system just died on us. The strobe still worked, but you would have to leave your office to see the strobes, and that was not the safest situation. Luckily, we were able to find the component at a local construction company that had it on the shelf, ready to be installed in a building in the area, and they were willing to give us that, as long as we ordered the part. And I think it was, 3 or 4 months to get that part in, and so that part probably is lit by now here.
Much better than trying to buy windows.
Yeah. So we were lucky that we were able to solve that, and thank goodness to the contractor willing to give that part up. Supply chain issues really impacted that. So we're gonna have to, these are really all necessary improvements, and it totals $3.8 million. You've seen this slide before. The 23.5 had a $200,000 contribution. We are proposing another $200,000 contribution for the 23-24. And then the other three is just how we're gonna wean ourselves off from this tax stabilization reserve. And that concludes both budgets presentations, and Alex and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have on either one.
Thank you both. I appreciate the overview, so I'll open up the committee. Questions that you may have, and then I have on my agenda, we'll get into specifics, both facilities, revenues, and finance is also on my list. But before we jump there, questions on the overview that you've heard thus far?
Oh, I have a
Yep,
couple
matter of
just
fact, go
structural
ahead.
questions.
Yep.
So, because I'm new to this, does this group approve the 6-month budget at our meeting in November? That's the plan?
It makes a recommendation to the county commissioners.
Commissioners, right. Okay, so we pass that along. And then the approval on the FY '24 budget would happen in the summertime? Is that right?
No, that would happen in November also.
Oh, both at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's early. How do we do the '24 budget, not knowing, for example, the jail situation until the spring?
That would be something that we probably will have to come back if things go awry. We will have to be working and come back to the finance committee.
For an adjustment?
I don't know if you both want to also just give, again, because I appreciate you asking questions, just how this committee then functions with the next 2 meetings, given, I know we've done some things different than last year, but if you just want to sort of contextualize that, would that help? Just what are these next steps as we have this
If
before?
I'm the only new one, you don't have to do it?
Oh, no, and again, we're
Okay.
taping this as well, there might be new people watching, we want to make sure everybody sort of understands what our process is, so that might be helpful too.
Sure. Tonight typically is our kickoff night. It's a little bit more than what we typically have on the agenda, only because we're meeting in person.
Yep.
And then we will go into meetings 2 and 3. A little bit further in the agenda this evening, we'll talk, what was the finance committee want to see for structure of meeting 2 and 3. Last year, meeting 2, we brought in 3 or 4 different departments, heard from those larger departments on their budgets and the impacts that their budgets brought to the tax rate. And then the third meeting is typically anything left over that the committee wants to discuss, ultimately kind of narrowing ourselves up, or the committee up, to a recommendation to the county commissioners. We have 3 meetings scheduled. If the committee feels as though a 4th is needed, so be it. We're open to that, but really at either the meeting 3 or meeting 4. Meeting 4 would definitely be a deadline sometime in mid-November, late November, because we have to get the budget to the commissioners for the second Monday of December by state statute, how that all plays out. So that's typically how it all works out. The reason why we need to do the 23-24 budget now is that needs to be all wrapped up into the warrant that we send out to communities in February of each year. And that warrant is sent out in February, but it's not due until August. Actually, they start coming in August, but the due date is October 31st of next year.
And I think the key piece to that is a really fixed point. The thing that we can't alter is that due September 1st, penalties or extra fees start getting assessed October 31st. Those 2 dates are the hard set in stone points that we can't move. So everything we do has to be sort of working backwards from there, which is why it'll sometimes feel like we're coming at this a little bit backwards. But it's also a big, big, big part of why this shift to the fiscal year and getting everything on the same year. Yeah, it's gonna be kind of awkward this go around, but then at least it's done. Please, please, please never do this ever again.
Fair enough. Well, thank you both for the context. And a part of two, we've also invited some of the department heads in. We did this last year because we knew we had more meetings. We sort of waited. We're sort of truncating everything. So that's some of the budget items we wanted to get to. We also wanted department heads in to kind of hear about budgets as well. So we'll do a piece of that as well. So if you have any questions, because we have such a truncated time frame and we only have, what, 3, possibly 4, ask away. Really, this is sort of recommendations sending out, so I hope that helps, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, thoughts?
So on the jail side, you talked about the non-union employee COLA. When are the union negotiations for the jail employees, and how do those fall into the budget? You know, where we're moving the cycle around a little bit. Does that fall all in line?
They're already on a July to June cycle, and they are under contract through 24, 25? Yeah.
Okay, so we're not worried about union negotiations on this go-around of the budget?
The only union negotiations that we have upcoming is our deputies, sheriff's office patrol.
Because as we talked about in the last meeting, you know, unfortunately, when the county salaries go up, so do all the towns, basically, because we're all fighting over the same officers at that point, so it's kind of a bloodbath for all of us, so. You know, it's unfortunate, but it drives like 2 budgets up at the same time, it's just compounding at the end of the day, so, okay, thank you.
Good question. Any others? I wanted to ask the order. Right now, on my mind, on our agenda, we have facilities, revenues. You touched on human services, and we can go back to, and then finance before we get to number 3. I didn't know if you wanted to do that in that order, or if you wanted to do revenues, maybe touch on finance and human services, and then have our department heads speak to current departments. I want to make sure to do it whatever order makes sense, since we have both here.
Well, we structured the debt service tax anticipation note to get that off, whether there's any questions or not on that. Then we went into the capital and non-debt, because Bill's here from the facilities, and a lot of times Bill's the one that's generating that number that's getting put in the budget, and he knows the nuts and bolts of each project. So if there was any questions about scope of project, why we need to do this now, that would be Bill. And then while Bill's here talking about capital, we said, well, Bill, why don't you just stick around, because we'll save you another trip coming in next meeting to talk about your facilities budget. So we put him down for facilities budget.
Like
So
it.
I think if we run that gamut, we
Yep.
can
Good.
move in a good direction.
That's good. Yeah, if the committee's all right with that, let's do that. Since do you feel, any questions on debt service and tax anticipation on anything specific? All right, then let's jump down to 2 and 3, the capital non-debt bonding, then facilities department. We'll talk specifically about that. I know you touched on a bit of the non-debt and bonding, but does the committee have any questions before we sort of leak into the facilities budget itself?
So just for a quick reference, if you want to look at bonded items and non-debt items, it's right on the back sheet of your packets here. The top graph is the bonded
Yeah,
items,
can
the
I get a
bottom.
copy of that?
So typically in the, we talked a little bit about the bonding items on a 30,000-foot level in the PowerPoint. Non-debt, we really didn't dive into what that 169,700 and the 23.5 budget is. We have a number of lines within this non-debt budget, non-debt capital budget, that get funded every single year, as you can see. It includes technology upgrades, patrol and CID upgrades, ballistic vests, tactical vests, taser replacements, radio replacements. The jail has a CIP account, which is typically $100,000, but the 6-month budget is $50,000. And then elevator replacement, because we know that our actually there's 3 elevators in this, this complex are gonna need to be replaced, and so we're incrementally saving for that cost, because it's about $500,000 an elevator, so we're
This is in
seeing-
anticipation.
Yeah, yeah, so it's not a surprise like the first one was a couple years ago. So those are our key, and that's what we really focused on in the 6-month budget, is just funding to some level. A lot of times it was the 50% of what we typically do on an annual basis for those items. Getting over to the 23-24, now you start seeing what the true allocation annually is. So we do jump up from 169,700 to 278,100. We really haven't proposed anything more in that non-debt, as we feel as though that was something that we have such a heavy bonded request that we shouldn't compound it by just keep on adding non-debt items. So we've really skinnied that budget up over the next 18 months.
So can I ask, there's a couple of items here, they look like basically one time and then we sort of can wait. Taser replacement seems like one, elevator replacement, again, you sort of do it. Your 23, 24, we don't have it, specifically taser replacement, there's almost a gap. Do you know the length of time where where that may come back up again, so your taser replacement, what's the length of time? And I only ask because this larger jail budget conversation. If we're moving towards a vision of how do we compensate for either non-full staff, does taser replacement and other things here actually have to be, can you use less of them? Is that sort of, you understand what I'm asking? If we're shrinking everything, does it also shrink some of this as well?
Typically, the taser is based on the patrol deputies,
Okay.
not the jail staff.
Okay,
And why you see the blanks after the 6-month budget is that it is anticipated in one shape or form, we will be going into the body cams and dash cams.
Yep.
And body cams, the vendor actually has a taser that is activated. It's actually a gun holder and taser. If either one are drawn, the body cam automatically goes on. So it's all gonna be under that contract, so we're not gonna have to allocate on an annual basis out of the capital line anymore,
Okay.
because it's gonna be landing somewhere else within the budget.
Cumberland has that system.
So the-
Yeah.
it's a great system, but
Yes,
that helps me explain this,
Yeah.
so thank you, yeah.
It helps reduce the FOIA requests, too. There isn't any question that we've got,
Get the video.
no, he said, she said, or,
With regard to the elevator, we're just skipping it just to sort of to skinny it for that 18-month cycle. But again, every time that elevator goes, it's a lot. Horrified by the number. So most of these funds, they are reserve funds, but to be honest, the departments tend to drain them pretty much as they go. For example, that patrol and CID, that's the tough books for the laptops for the vehicles.
Oh, yes.
That's what you're seeing when you see those, so that's different. The technology upgrades, that's mostly just the regular desktop computers that our IT director is cycling out pretty regularly. And he's very much trying to keep them rolling as much as he can, so.
5-year turnover.
5-year, yeah.
Yep. We definitely had to boost that a little bit at the start of 2020 for obvious reasons, but now that's done at least, so.
Sure. Good, thank you. Other questions on this section?
If I could ask, Bill,
Yep.
do you have any additional information around the larger items under the bond that you'd like to share?
I think Jim touched on it a little bit, the surprise of the additional door locks at the jail, the cell doors. That came about thinking that it would be covered under the larger jail project and not realizing that that portion of it wouldn't necessarily be covered under that type of funding. So we can't have 2 separate door locking systems running at the same time in master control or in the pod CO's desk. We have to have one. So that number kind of it wouldn't be as high if we didn't have to worry about that. As far as the jail, we do, the jail roof, every year we spend probably 25 to 30, I would say, in repairs. It's just really has gone beyond its usable life, its original roof. So it's been around over 30 years, so it's really time we need to do something with that.
Was that a built-up roof or a rubber roof?
It's a ballast roof, so,
Ballasted rubber?
oh yeah,
And-
yeah, with rubber rock holding the rubber down. So
So you're not gonna do that again?
it's up to it's under it's in the discussion phase.
It's not very environmentally friendly,
I totally get that.
A glue-down roof with
Yes,
insulation.
yes. That's the conversation we're having right now, is the best route to go, because it's very labor intensive and costly to remove that rock as well.
Right.
So that number, it's a tough conversation to see which way we wanna go. The way you're talking about is
Plus you get some additional efficiencies of heat loss.
correct, very much so, but the amount that it would cost to remove what is existing is a conversation we need to figure out if that's the route we want.
Put the inmates up there, let them remove it.
That's not a conversation.
January.
Exactly.
Starting to be reminiscent of a movie I've seen.
I didn't say it. I didn't.
Say, no, I don't wanna have that conversation.
So, so this number then,
Yes.
what's sort of going into that number then, if you're still in conversations about the way in which you want to operate that?
So we had, our roofing contractor come in and give us an actual hard quote, a
Okay.
proposal, and this was last spring.
Okay.
At that point, it was, 1.5 and some change, knowing that everything has increased so much, and they said this time next year, if you were to do it, this is the number that they gave us. So we're trying to hold to that number, and they gave us worst case scenario. I'm not saying that number there is what
What do I know?
it's going to be. That's what they're anticipating it to be.
Yeah,
But the conversation needs to be had once we get close to it, do we go with the ballast roof that's there, or do we go with a different style setup and then what would be this cost savings and other cost saving measures that go along with it?
have you talked about, sort of a plan B, given that, let's say that number sticks, and you find out that it's more, because you had said that the jail cell door locks were not under the original project. Do you know of other funding that you would then try to seek out in terms of that project, if that got underway? And that conversation has been broached, yeah.
Honestly, I have a lot of faith in our roofing contractor. I've dealt with him outside of this entity before, and they're very sharp. They're very honest and upfront, which is a good relationship to have, so there's really nothing that should be any surprises,
Okay,
other than there's a lack of rubber roofing, and we're waiting
right, but, no, that's good
years
confidence.
to get it.
My son works for Car. I can get you some rubber roofing.
There,
All right.
you've solved the problem
Exactly.
tonight. Good
Great
deal.
question, great answer.
Other questions, folks? Anything else you want to speak to on some of the other bonded items? I don't know if there's anything specific you had.
Bill, you want to talk a little bit about the garage repairs and
Yeah,
the
sure.
study that you did? Because this group will be working on the budgets for the next couple of years, because we've all trapped them into a 3-year term. And so, this will probably be another discussion point a year from now. So why don't you talk about that?
So I worked with a local engineering firm that specializes in parking garages. They've done ones for the city already, specifically at the Jetport, and they have given us a 10-year capital improvement plan and basically laid it out. Year one, this is what you should look to do, and they prioritize those in the most in need that needs to be done. You know, they basically did high, medium, and low-level items. This number represents, I think, year one and year two, if I remember correctly, of the highest priority items that we really need to take care of. Granted, when they say high, it's not something that is, need to shut it down. So let me just emphasize that. The high level is not something that we're in peril, we need to shut it down, we need to stop business type thing. This is to get ahead of it.
Okay.
So that way we can minimize the impact years down the road. This will also help us with money that we have in the budget for overall maintenance. A lot of money that we have there is just basic maintenance that we try to keep up. It's a rubber textured concrete floor that, again, rubber is very expensive, and especially for flooring that goes over a poured concrete decking is also not very advantageous with salt and the constant traffic that is in the garage. So that's the highest number in those repairs in the first 2 years, is actually getting that surface redone. As far as that goes, they laid it out pretty explicitly what we should be looking at and going that way. So, and I'm basically going by on their lead, as they are the professionals. And then the discussions, if we need to move things as things maybe change, we have that wiggle room to be able to swap.
Yeah.
As far as the fire alarm here, Jim talked about it already. It's time, it's original also, and these parts are becoming, like a lot of the things, obsolete. When a part goes, you flip a coin to hope that you can make it work, because there's not a lot of things that are out there right now. Brick repointing the age of the structure. It's all brick. You know, it's really starting to wear. You know, it's typical building structure. Just needs to be taken care of. That's it. Yeah.
Don't those kids that pass need a job?
I don't know. Maybe.
Points of bricks.
There you go. There you go.
Talking about the parking garage, if anyone has any experience with parking garages, you can sink that type of money annually into one of those. It just seems like you never get done doing something to a parking garage. So hopefully we can do some proactive things to buy ourselves some time.
Yeah, and you said that number represents a sort of year 1 and 2
Yeah.
of a 10 year.
Pretty much. And by the time the 10-year gets around, you're almost going right back to
Right around,
year 1
yeah.
to start all over again, so.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
What's the annual revenue minus expenses for the parking garage?
Good question.
I can answer that. One sec.
Sorry, you all have to suffer through the new person's questions.
No?
We are increasing the revenues for the parking garage. We have increased the rates, or proposing to increase the rates, as we canvass the Portland Peninsula to see what other garages are charging. We never want to be up high, but we want to be in that sweet spot just behind them on the monthly rate and the hourly rate. So that has resulted in an increase in revenue for the garage this
Do
year.
you know what that new hourly rate is?
Bill?
Rate currently is $350. It's gonna be going to for turn of the year.
Oh, just 4, okay.
Yep, and that is the sweet spot when we actually canvassed all of the local parking garages just in this area.
Yep.
And it's not the lowest, it's not the highest, it is literally right in that sweet spot.
Great.
And I have numbers. For the next full year budget of 23-24, we're proposing a budget of $740,000 annually in revenues. I would always put in the caveat with that, which is, yes, that number could be a lot higher were it not for the fact that it's also what houses a rather large number of county and state employees. And we also try to keep it as reasonable as possible because this garage is being used by people
Yep.
coming in here to attend courts and stuff. So we try hard to ride that line on this particular line item. And it's where I find myself being a little counterintuitive at times, where I know I'm supposed to be the one pushing it, but we gotta always keep sight of the fact that it's not the primary focus as a moment. Although it does. The other thing that's occurring is by the 23-24 budget, it'll be up to 242 annually. And now that's a big part of, actually part of the facilities discussion, something that Bill instituted last year, which is he shifted a lot of money that formerly was housed in the facility budget over to the garage to try to reflect the true cost of it. So all of the utilities, all of the maintenance, there was a person who used to be in the facilities budget that was partially assigned to the garage and partially assigned to stuff. It's all fully in there. So what he's done is he's fully utilized like everything that that garage is truly costing, nothing baked into facilities. So those are the two numbers there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? That might be a good segue into the facilities, because I made some notes here, but, Bill, if you want to talk on the facilities budget itself,
Sure.
That'd be helpful.
Sure, so basically, the 23 six-month budget is roughly 6 months of what it would to keep the lights on in here and just keep basic services as far as what we're going, what we're trying to do with all the facilities we have here. I had to negotiate with our service contract providers and to negotiate the difference in cost, would it be, because a lot of our service contracts ended in May or April, and which would be right in the middle of that 6-month contract. So I had to negotiate with them, what would it cost to pick up those extra months in that following year's budget. All of them had no problem with it, and were more than willing to make that stick. They had to do a what-if, so it might have been a little bit more than what I would have anticipated at times, not overboard, but they have to go by what-if. And I got it, type thing. That's pretty much it. I mean, I just looked at just trying to keep, electricity, natural gas, a little bit here breaking. It's tough because it's wintertime, it's really wintertime. We can't predict snow, we can't predict how much materials we'd use for, salt and manpower for overtime and such like that. So, I would say this is about as bare bones as you can get to keep it going for 6 months.
I may ask this twice to you, but first time I'll ask
Yep.
is, as you had stated, you've moved a few things into where they should be.
Mm-hmm.
Can you highlight, did you do that in this 6-month budget? What were the places where we might see it in a different place than we would normally see? Where would that switch happen for the,
I think,
A lot of that occurred last year's budget.
okay,
actually.
so now we should be,
Happened.
okay.
yeah, last year's.
The hard part, right? When you
Right.
go, well, you keep going.
Right, no, fair enough.
That was last year.
Yeah, that's right. Last year was the first year
You
that
did.
it was implemented because, like Alex said, we tried to see what was truly our expense to keep that garage open.
Right.
Because it used to be under the general facilities budget, and the garage used to just show revenue. Now it's showing everything,
Right.
what we're actually spending every year.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so there was nothing that you popped up and said, oh, we should have moved this last year.
Yeah, no.
Basically, it was a clean
Yep,
slate.
Yep.
That's really helpful.
So Bill's budget in comparison to a full year is now 53%, so he is literally keeping the lights on. If
Yeah.
it probably wasn't for winter ops, it'd be even lower.
Very much so.
Yep. Any questions on the 6-month?
On the electricity side of it, that falls under, do we commodity buy our electricity?
Yes,
And then do we?
do main power options.
Okay, it's through that. Does that put it into a solar bank too, or just?
Thank you for asking. We have just gone online within the last 4 or 5 months with 4 megawatts of solar. And we're in a solar farm down in Waterboro, down in York County. We've taken 4 out of 5 megawatts in that farm. And we are getting what's the monthly check coming for that?
It's been interesting.
Oh, because
And I'll
that-
expand on
that's
that a
right.
little bit. So, just as that backup, one of the things that we do tend to do whenever we do this budget is we do circle back very close to the end of this to make some final adjustments. One of the final adjustments that we are anticipating making is going to be a reduction in electricity costs countywide. The reason we don't have that baked in already, because that number has gone anything from a low in midwinter of, the way it works out is we get a rebate from the solar farm for all of that generated, but then we have to give a pretty good chunk of it back to them. What it all should ultimately result in for us is about a 20% decrease in electricity if everything goes great. The reason we can't put that number in yet is I don't have a full year of data yet. And the amounts that I'm getting back from Central Maine Power are lagging by about 2 months. What makes that hard is the seasonal cycles. So, because we had a real panic attack where the amounts we were getting back from CMP were somehow less than what we were getting billed, and we finally realized that, for example, if CMP is giving us the March rebate in May, we're generating a lot more electricity. Once we get to the point where I start to be able to see all of fall, I can feel good about the fact that we can say, yes, this is really happening. It appears to be generating quite a lot of solar, and that looks great, but I really need to see it actually start working as we head down towards the back end of the cycle. And you're looking like somebody who's gone through this already, so.
I've done a little research. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. No, sorry, I didn't mean to laugh. It's just funny, we're buying our solar power from York County, the Cumberland County Finance Committee. That's all, from a solar farm in York County, that's all. So,
We tried to find one in Cumberland County, but no one was, one of the criteria was that you had to be in the permitting process and close to construction. There's so many out there that are trying to sell you something and.
no, everybody's got a deal to have. basically.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. No, that's great to hear that we're enrolled in it, and I mean, it sounds like you need some milestones basically to be to an actual perspective of where we're gonna be, that's all.
It went online early December of last year.
Was it that late?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah,
Right, which is tough in December to get a true gauge anyways, 'cause
yes,
not all
yes.
everything else.
Thus far, it's followed pretty much exactly the seasonal cycle you'd expect. It actually did great in July when we were in drought, so.
I'm sure it did.
How long is the contract for?
Long.
30 years?
Justin, I want to follow up on that. I'm solar, because I'm really interested in that also. We do not own an interest in a solar farm. We're,
No.
so the town of Cumberland built their own solar farm on the existing landfill facility. And by the type of agreement, the investors own it, and at the end of 7 years, we have the option of buying it back. So we are setting 1/7 aside each month, each year in our budget, so that when that 7th year comes, we can buy it outright. So then so anyways, at that point, we will have enough, we generate enough power for the town of Cumberland's, all our buildings to pay for itself. So we're also in the process of building we're going to an RFQ for our school district to build a 2-megawatt power station. So if there's not planning going on by the county in the same sort of thinking process, I would urge the county, because one, we have 21 communities to draw from. All we have to do is be near a 3-phase power substation, to tie in, and we should be in the planning stages of building our own power facility.
One time we were talking cogen plants, and we do have a cogen plant at the jail.
Yeah.
But there's some value in doing regional cogen plants.
I mean, you
too.
could build something up at Harrison or Bridgeton or,
We got plenty, thank you. We have a solar moratorium in place. Thank you.
it's our tax dollars,
No, I think it's a point well taken. All the towns, including Bridgeton, have been down the road, and there is an amazing number of different ways to go at it, and you always need to keep looking at what makes the most sense in terms of
Well,
building, sharing.
the
and
reality is, if you build that facility, the cost of the kilowatt is going to increase every year, but the value of your kilowatt that you produce matches that. So It's a wash. It's, once you,
Folks, any other questions on this 6-month? And I appreciate sort of going into the solar piece. I think it's good that we're having the discussion. But any other questions on the 6-month? Because I want to jump into the full year. All right, if, Bill, you wouldn't mind, you can give us, I don't know if you had any points to make on the actual full year. I had a few questions and know if other members had some as well.
Well, the full year basically is, oh, sorry, you wanna give?
Oh, no, I was gonna, I just had a very top-line question. Maybe I'm just looking at the wrong number before you even dig in.
Sure.
Of the facilities department, the adopted budget versus the budget request, the salaries, overtime, benefits, and taxes are actually down? Am I looking at these numbers correctly then?
Yeah, what-
But there's no change in the number of personnel.
There is one less, and I can talk about that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, I'll make a note. Cover page, must update.
Yeah.
Thank you. One position, we had one position that, as of last year, this was actually the former facilities director who we had convinced to stick around for a little while to help finish out some projects. We removed him from the budget for this next cycle coming up, because what we realized is that particular person, who is still basically cycling down as he heads into retirement, finishing out some projects, all of the projects that he was assigned to oversee were ARPA projects. For example, he's the point person for the medical wing at the jail, which is the really big thing coming up. And we realized, wait, everything he's doing is ARPA related, he doesn't need to be in the budget. The other piece to this though, and it really bears mentioning, every time I do the wages, I go through and I take a look at what everyone's currently earning, and also what they're taking for health insurance. Bill has done a lot of work within his department, he's brought in a lot of new folks. When you look at everyone that he's brought in, that's where the number lands. So I had to go through that a few times, and I landed on it, and I said, okay. So that's why you're seeing what you're seeing.
And Paul,
Must be had triple checked.
so, yeah, and Paul, you're talking about page 44, or are you on page?
Page 45, actually.
45, sorry, okay, yep, thank you.
So basically, the only real big difference for the 24 budget is the cost of materials that we need to make the essential repairs, electrical repairs, HVAC repairs, HVAC contracts. That number gone up because asking them this far in advance to project what the contracted amount for our service providers, unfortunately, they have to kind of throw a dart at it and say, this is where I think it's gonna lay. Maintenance supplies.
Yes. that was-
Maintenance supplies is another one that's increased. We're seeing, a lot of costs go up anywhere from 20 to 25% on just basic items. Supply chains is problems throughout for everything, and facilities usually is the one that takes the largest hit on just basic necessities, paper goods, cleaning supplies, just general maintenance items, and that's where we're seeing the largest increase. And I started seeing it more, I would say, early June, starting to see this stuff starting to creep up, and us going back out to try to get better pricing on just the basic, and we kept seeing it 10%, 15%, 20%. So my guess is that's where we're gonna, I believe we'll be right, that's right along where we will end up.
And that was one of the questions I had, page 49, the line 6504, maintenance supplies. I know what I'm thinking I'm reading is budget requested was 17K, and then what was preliminary is 10. Anytime I see sort of jumps, I always just want to ask, am I seeing it right, and then what is sort of the thinking here? So I'll ask, given what you're saying you're seeing those large increases, which makes sense as to why your actual expenses last year was so minimal. Everything's increased within a year. So what's the shift in the preliminary piece that I'm seeing?
So Are you talking about the 23-24 preliminary line, the column? Where it says 10 for repair supplies?
Yeah, 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 that's, yeah,
My guess, that might be a typo.
okay.
That's my guess.
That was us jumping in. He had requested that. We were seeing that the actuals weren't getting there. We knew it was still going to increase, so we jumped it down, and we're hoping that that's the right number.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Yeah, anything else, Bill? I only had one other question. Again, I always want to make sure I see what I'm seeing. In facilities and garage operation, so that'd be page 55. First off, when we do statistics, the way it's written, the availability of spaces, these aren't decreases of spaces. Those lines next to those numbers are just noting how many spaces of each we have. Is that how the, okay.
Yes, yes.
When you're in a budget, you see minuses.
Yes.
I'm thinking,
Yeah, no.
what are we losing? So, okay. And then the other question I had, so wages and salaries here, I think we had spoken to this, so that's page 56, line 5120-03. Just looked like a big jump, but maybe there's just something there that you're speaking to. Give me a little context here.
I believe this is where we shifted that part-time, I say part-time employee, that employee from the facilities budget.
Yep.
Out to the garage budget, so that's part of the actual showing what it takes to run the garage. I believe this is, we finally
Yep.
migrated.
Okay.
And my apologies, I misspoke. Last year, we moved a lot of those bottom line items.
Yes. Yep.
And this year, we did move that employee as well over.
Okay.
So, sorry, I got that backwards.
No, hey, that's why we ask the questions. No worries. No worries. Any other questions on this, the full year?
And just to be clear, by last year, I mean 2022, which is why you're not
Yes.
seeing a lot of those lines in 2021 yet. It's all
Oh, yeah.
starting now.
No, there's a lot of grace given here, because I know everything's just a little bit different this time, so.
It's hurting our brains.
Yeah. Takes me 2 or 3 times to look at it sometimes, but it's all good. Any other questions for Bill and the team? I mean, for me, silence is affirmation, so I would say, appreciate all that you've shared today. I think it's good. Any other last thoughts, pieces?
I'll try not to get too far into the weeds. When it's facilities related, that is kind of my area of somewhat expertise.
What he's saying is he gets very passionate, and we appreciate that, so. Thank you, Bill, appreciate it very much. Moving forward, the next item up would be the revenues piece. I did have questions on that, but didn't know if we wanted to jump back and speak to that. Yeah, Bill, if you want to go. Bill, yeah, I don't think we need him.
You can hang out if you want.
If you really want to carry on for another 2 hours, you go ahead, but.
I'd love to. Thank you.
We'll let you exit while we shift, we'll let you exit. So, we'll jump to the revenues piece. I believe this is the, what page is it? Someone has it.
Put that up on the screen.
Sure, my budget. We're gonna reach.
What page?
I have page 14 on the full year budget, and if we're looking at the 6 month, it's probably around there as well. Page,
My suggestion for revenues would be
Yeah.
perhaps it might make more sense if we just focus on the 23-24 budget.
Yep.
Because the stuff that I'm putting in half year is the same trends. It's not, we're not gonna be saying something's doing something wildly different in the half year than it's doing in the full year.
that's fine, 'cause most of my questions were on the full year anyways, but I figured that was the case. Everything seemed to be carryover
Yeah.
conceptually wise. Yep.
Right, exactly. It's all the same concepts.
All right. For the Committee on Revenues, did you want to speak to any specific before we just start firing questions? Was there anything that you wanted to highlight in that, section?
I can jump in on a few things,
Yep.
certainly. There's a couple areas. One that we've already hit on is the parking garage revenues, which we've definitely boosted up. And this is a case where we've gotten to a place where we started to really trust that these higher numbers are gonna stick around. And that's why you're seeing that up there, plus the rate increases. Another number to bear mention is the dispatch center CCRC revenues. That's a set in stone number. That's based off of formulas that are based off of the service that the individual towns are requesting, and then based off of their population from the most recent census. So there are some adjustments that are going in there due to the 2020 census coming out, which is why you're seeing some bigger changes in those lines than you might otherwise. The next one that we want to talk about here, I think, is Registry of Deeds, which is a really interesting one. We are keeping that number flat, and I think Jim might have something to pass around if we want to talk about that. That's been a really, really interesting and pretty oddball line for us the past few years, in that if we go back in time to March 2020, we're all sitting around thinking to ourselves, oh boy, what's gonna happen at Registry of Deeds? Are we going to suddenly have a $3 million hole in the budget because nothing at all occurs? Of course, we all know now in hindsight, what occurred is all of the United States moved to Maine.
Which we appreciate in different ways.
One of the craziest years of numbers I've ever seen, which was that purple line that you see in, so let me walk through that graph we just handed out. The red line that you see there is the 5-year average of what happens at the Registry of Deeds. Under normal operations, it's a pretty consistent line. It goes a little up at good times and down a little bit at bad times, but it stays pretty consistent. That purple line is 2021. And that's what you see when properties go absolutely berserk. But we all knew that that was not gonna last forever, because there was just no earthly way it would continue. And we were starting to see it in the blue line you've got here, which was 2022 year to date, which was trending less, still over budget, but much less so. The really notable numbers here are July and August, which have now reverted right back to the mean. So it's looking like we've seen that end. What is interesting about these numbers is the number of transactions occurring are actually well below average right now. We're seeing less transactions per day right now, but it's a whole new world in our region. So the values are up, transactions are down. We're thinking we might be about right here, but this has been an extremely volatile line for us over the past couple of years. And it's of all the things that I never would have predicted at the start of the pandemic, this would have to be high up there, that this would be one of the impacts. But it appears that that's ended. We're certainly seeing in our monthly numbers from Deeds that it's come back down sort of to earth there. So that's Deeds. So there's no changes there, but a lot of backstory behind those no changes. Probate is the next interesting one. You're seeing some pretty hefty increases there. And this may prove to be a department even to talk to on this front. Something very interesting has been occurring in probate the past couple of years. They've been getting busier, and the value of the estates that they're passing through has started to really ratchet up. There's, as far as they can tell anecdotally, but also it sort of bears out some sense, this is baby boomers. So this is something we are anticipating seeing for a while to come, which is why we are raising that line, because we're now into a couple of years of this occurring. Jim and I happen to sit right down the hall from probate. It's busier than we've ever seen it. It's just an interesting shift in a department that generally doesn't shift. This is not a revenue line that you see a lot of variation on, but I miss anything on that?
No, spot on.
It's an interesting one. But finally, when they gave that answer, it was like, So that's the revenues, that's sort of my overview of what we're looking at half year to this year. I don't know if I maybe answered some of the questions or brought up new ones or not.
Brought up a new one for me. Maybe this is a conversation that is ongoing. If value is up and transactions are down, will you keep in the long term that value and the value of registry of deeds? So will that continue to increase, or will you shift value as transactions come down? Like, will it be more and more expensive as time goes on, but you're seeing less and less? Because then your concept of revenue is going to be you're going to be really trying to leak out very few things. So I'm just curious if you're thinking that value is going to continue to rise, or are you going to pull back on that?
Our best guess, based off of a lot of competing factors, is that what we've got right now is probably gonna stay this way for a little while.
Okay.
We have this, we're not seeing market value, we're not seeing values of anything go down right now.
Right.
We're seeing transactions go down, but it's sort of looking like we're not going to see something that we did see back in the early 2000s, where values start to plummet and sales start to plummet, and refinances as well. That could cause a real crash in there. But it's a lot of variables, and it's definitely been a tough one there. We keep a really close eye on it.
Yeah. No, I know I'm trying to make you seem like a prophet or fortune teller, which is hard because there's so much going on. But I was just curious if that conversation had sort of begun to emerge, given that trend you're seeing.
Yeah, one of the things that we pay a lot of attention to is Jessica Spalding, the Register of Deeds, really pretty much the second every month closes, she sends us the transactions numbers, so the number of plans done and the number of just raw changes that have occurred. And it's very interesting how typically in the past that number and our revenues would sort of run hand in hand, and that's not happening right now. One's down and the other's staying stable.
All right.
Yeah, I wish I could.
No, well, you
I
just
jump
keep an eye on
businesses if I do
it.
that one.
Yeah. Committee members, any other questions? I'm going to throw two more at you. If you could just speak to passports and the expectations for the DA office. Why am I seeing sort of these shifts, or maybe talk a little bit about what's going on there?
Yes, I feel bad, I'm stealing probate's thunder a little bit. Passport processing, they've had a bit of an interesting development. They are catching, and I'm gonna maybe choose my words, I don't have to be that careful. They are catching overflow from other agencies that are canceling appointments for passports. So we are getting pretty regular Friday surge of panicked people showing up to get their passports done us, because we're still running. But other entities that shall not be named have started to just day of announce that they're sorry, we're not keeping your appointment for your passport, which is.
And it comes down to lack of staffing.
Yes.
They don't have available staff for that day, so they're canceling the appointments.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it definitely, again, Jim and I being right down the hall from them, we're getting to a place where we can pretty much tell. Like, it's the family looking panicked. You know what that is.
You have 6 weeks.
Yeah. They thought they had it all straight,
exactly.
and then they suddenly discovered not so much.
Yeah.
District attorney, what has occurred there? Are you speaking to how it sort of went down and back up again?
Yeah, there's a lot of variation in just, looking at
Correct.
the multiple years.
So that's COVID. What that is that's deferred dispositions. So basically, every time there's any kind of a conviction, there are those people who have that option, if the judge and the prosecutor allows it, for that person to have a reduced sentence with supervision to make sure that they don't violate the conditions of that. So it's another one of those mechanisms to keep people out of jail that might otherwise be in jail, and keep people from having a felony next to their name that might otherwise not have that. So for those people, they have to pay fees for their supervision during that time period. that all came to a screeching halt in 20, and to a lesser extent in 21, which is why you see 21 start to come back up. 22 is back to normal.
Okay. And this, so, and I think you even mentioned in your summary that there are moments where you're trying to get back to a pre-pandemic state. This is one of those where now you're seeing what we probably would have normally seen had we not had that 2-year gap.
Correct.
Gotcha.
We're not seeing it go over, which
No.
is interesting. So it speaks a little bit to that. Not everything from that gap is necessarily gonna get caught up.
Yep. Yep. Okay. That's really helpful. No, I appreciate that. Other questions on revenues?
On the tax distribution schedule, refresh my memory on that. That's done by popular census data, right, is how that's collected?
No, actually, that's done on state equalized valuation.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. So basically, every year, right around December, Jim and I put out the word to various town finance directors saying, hey, did you get your valuation yet? Because they don't give it to
And
us
we tell
first,
you
because
no.
we're not the direct. What's that?
We tell you
We tell
no,
you.
we didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, that's how you yeah, right? You know, if it went down, you're gonna give it to us real fast.
Exactly.
Problem is, somebody's gonna go down and end up giving it to us. And then as soon as we get that number, then we've got our final, which is why you see in the budgets, I'm just using the prior year, which is why you don't see those variations. And those numbers, the past few years, I always describe those state equalized valuations as sort of this interesting bullseye pattern, that anytime you start to see Portland, South Portland in particular, really spike in their values, you can almost see it in the subsequent years as it sort of trickles out. Although the real western edge of the county doesn't tend to get affected as much by that bullseye, but you'll definitely see it occur. But again, the past few years have been kind of all over the place.
However, a number of communities have had revals over the last 2 years, or
Yeah, no kidding.
Gorham's
no.
going through it right now. So Falmouth is too, South Portland, Portland were just a year and a half ago. So when you factor that all in, there's a lot of communities within that reval criteria over the last 3 years that kind of balance themselves off one another.
Other questions? Let's move on to human services and grants. Jim, if you want to maybe even touch on this a little bit again. I know you briefly did, but
Sure.
go ahead and touch on it one more time. I think this is close to the last page, correct? Page
Thank you, yes.
97 in the
Yeah,
larger.
we've tried to give a snapshot and, on the bottom there, what each of these partners do across the county. These are long-standing contributions that we make to these entities. The Cumberland Extension Association, the program, they're circled around agriculture, the natural resources, families, health, and nutrition. They are the leaders in the 4-H club, and the Master Gardener. And they do a lot of work with the farmers within the county. They typically ask for much more than what we contribute. I think their ask this year is around $165,000. And over the last 2 years, the commissioners have kept their allocations flat at 115. I'm proposing a $5,000 bump this year to 120,000. Other than that, soil and water is a consistent $18,000 a year. Portland Public Library, they have a variety of different capital expenses. In 2022, I think that we helped them with their Wi-Fi mesh network within their building and outside their building, extending over Monument Square. So that's the type of projects they're working on. They do not, but like the extension service and soil and water, the public library doesn't use that for operational costs and for employees. Casco Bay Can was a drug-free communities division up in the Gray, New Gloucester area. It represents, I think, about 5 or 6 towns, extending down into the Cumberland area, Greeley School District. Their funding fizzled out through the federal grant that they were receiving this month, actually. And so that, the board has hit the pause button because of no funding. Our public health director is currently working on a grant due the end of this month to seek new state funding for alcohol awareness, obesity, and tobacco. It's 3 versus Casco Bay Can was really focused on substance abuse. The grant that we're working on is kind of a trifecta and a multi-year, up to 10 years worth of funding. So Casco Bay Can could have some form of life breathed back into it. That's to be seen, or it could look much different if we were successful in the grant opportunity. Tedford House is a homeless shelter up in the Brunswick-Topsom area, and we contribute $15,000 to help them with operational costs. We have also helped them through our ARPA funds. They are, much like Portland, working on a new shelter up in the Cook's Corner area, and we contributed, I think, $1.5 million towards that shelter for them. So they do terrific work up in that region. Coastal County Workforce, we had a contribution of $1,000 the last couple of years. We never distributed that funds, and so I'm proposing not funding that this year. And then the Thrive 2027 program, which is I call it a subsidiary of United Way, is the Thrive 2027 went through a 10-year look at creating certain benchmarks and goals to try to bring certain health, education within our region up to a certain level. And by doing that, they fund those nonprofits and entities in our region who are doing the work to help them gain capacity and work on increasing the numbers throughout our region to meet the goals of Thrive 2027 as put before them. And so we, a couple of years ago, kind of packaged together a lot of nonprofits that we were giving $2,000 to, $5,000 to, $10,000 to, and really brought all that money together and went, here, Thrive 2027, you're funding the same group of people. Why not, let's pool our money all together. They have the application process, they have the reporting process. It brings greater accountability in through their process than it was through our process, so that's why we've partnered with Thrive 2027. So, in all, we're looking at $263,000. This current year, we're funding at $275,000. That largely is Casco Bay Can going away. That's $16,000 a year.
Jim, off the top of your head, do you know how many beds there are at Tedford House? That's okay, I can look it
I
up.
want to say like 60.
Okay,
They have single beds and they also have family rooms. It's a different
Yep.
type of situation, but I think it's 60. Don't quote me on it, though.
okay.
Other questions on grants, grant requests? These tend to usually be the ones that the commissioners focus on throughout, or do some of these change? Because I know what we're looking at here are a few years prior, but it says at the top that they'll usually review requests. How many requests usually come in, and how do those maybe change over the years?
This program was around $400,000 at one time.
Okay. well,
And it was, if you look at past budgets, there could have been 15 or 20 different nonprofits funded.
yeah.
And
Or more.
Or more.
Wow.
And so, when we really looked at reconfiguring this and working with Thrive 2027, that process of receiving all these applications, all kinds of funding, and the finance committee at the time would have just one meeting to hear from all the asks.
Gotcha.
We really kind of stopped that.
Gotcha.
And so we have our concrete, the Portland Library is always in, soil and water, the extension service. The extension service, by state statute, we have to provide them funding. It doesn't say how much. It could be $1, it could be $120,000. But over the years, that has climbed to that threshold.
Gotcha.
We've been funding them for, I think, 20-plus years.
Good deal.
You
Any
were
other
right,
questions?
64 beds
Oh, good guess.
between individuals and families. Well done.
Thank you.
Any other questions on Human Services grants? All right, let's move over to the last piece, Finance Executive and Human Services budgets. I'll let you both sort of do this as you feel it works best. So any three, whichever one you want to start with.
Well, Amy, would you like to start?
That was a nice throw. Yeah.
I actually wanted to go.
It was,
We'll chat tomorrow, Jim.
I'll kick it off.
And this is page 39 in your full year.
I won't anymore.
That will help.
She was awful quiet over there.
As backstory in case, this is Amy's first year at these.
Oh.
So, but that's why Jim doing that was a little bit of.
Nothing wrong.
Amy just took over the HR director's position in July.
Oh, okay. Nothing wrong with a little trial by fire, by the way.
I asked to come to this to see how the process works, and
And you almost ran it. You're almost about to run it.
exactly,
A little hazing, I guess.
exactly.
Sorry. So getting into the county manager's budget, we have a salaries are increasing due to the COLAs and steps available to employees. One thing that, and I'm just focused on the year, the 23-24.
And you're starting on what page? I had shouted out
31, page
39, but
31.
it's, yeah, thank you. 31 for the first part. Yep.
31.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, my page numbers, I don't have page numbers, so, no new positions. However, under the personnel, a lot of the positions are grant-funded within my office. The compliance and audit manager is opera-funded, the public health manager is opera-funded, and the recruiter is showing up on this page, but it's really in the HR office, but that is opera-funded too. So we do have three, and so that we prevent a cliff from happening, we are looking at scheduling out over the next 2 or 3 years, slowly building those salaries into the budget. I had been building the public health directors into the budget for the last 2 or 3 years, because that was something that I've been after, and really kicked myself that I didn't do it sooner, because the public health director would have been very helpful in the pandemic. Not on the back, but we did have the opportunity through opera to get that position on board, and we took advantage of it. And so we'll continue to build that program into the general fund, so that we do not have a cliff when opera runs out in a couple of years.
Just as an add-on to that, that compliance and audit manager, that person will continue through ARPA, sort of past what one would typically consider the end of it, because she's going to be still monitoring all of those projects that have been, that have been scheduled out, right? Because there's the deadline where if something is obligated by the date, it can keep going on there. And you know, she's gonna have her hands full with those, particularly as we get to the back end.
So,
Well,
in the actual number, there's a total personnel service increase of 17.5%. So can you, I mean, I guess I'm hearing you say some of that is coming from movement and some of it's coming from just normal. Can you split the two pieces out? What?
Yep, there are some salary increases in there that's causing that. That is not a change in number of personnel. That is salary changes, some of the new positions. This is one where the health insurance was just, seemed like every employee in that department went out the step. It's sort of the flip side of what occurred in facilities. So those were the two things that really drove that one up particularly. But yes, it is a big one.
So the wage and, just skipping the benefits, the wage and salary increase from 365 to 412, that's no new people, that's that 47,000 increase on the 365 base is just salary increases, no change in personnel, there's no anything
Correct.
different.
Correct. And that has that has the compounding COLA from the 2.5 in January into it, and also the 5% in July being proposed, as well as a merit step in there also.
Kind of taking a step back, is that true of like all the departments have baked into them a COLA, merit steps in some fashion?
If the department has non-union employees, the non-union employees have a new merit step table that we'll be going through.
So, and again, I'm just stepping back to the very beginning, because we kind of, I don't know, glossed over, isn't the right phrase to use, but the big ticket item, obviously, throughout the entire budget is wages, salary, and benefits. And you listed out what the increases were. Is there any, I know you just came in July, but do you have any, like, study of regional increases by type of job study that led you to conclude those numbers?
Yes, back in early spring, we received a study for we didn't do every non-union employee, but we did those non-union employee classifications that we were having trouble hiring, just to make sure that we were in the market for those positions. And so that kind of dictated some adjustments in salaries that we had to do to be able to attract individuals within the classifications that we had studied. We also, through that report, had them look at how we would develop a grade step table, because the county was behind the 8 ball in the grade step table that was rolled out in 2014, in which you would have to be here 5 years for an increase, and then you'd have to be here 10 years for another increase, 15 years, every 5 years you got an increase. And in today's world, that's undoable. You lose ground on your market, on your employees' salaries, and you're not keeping up, and you're always looking at them walking out the door because the salaries are better somewhere else. So we had to reinvent the grade step table, and typically the grade step table gives anywhere from a 0.7% to a 1% increase, depending upon what grade you're at. It's not a huge increase, but it's an annual increase of around that. One thing I'd like to point out is that we did have a 2.5% COLA in January proposed and a 5% in July. One thing that we felt as though we were behind the 8 ball on was the COLAs that we gave our employees January of 2022. We proposed a 3.5% COLA in January 2022. Having run in the circles with the town and city managers in Cumberland County and York County while they were developing their budgets in the spring of 2022, many municipalities were at that 5%, 6%, 7% COLA for their employees. And here we were at 3.5%, because we were building our budget in August of last year. And we didn't have the luxury of seeing what the economy was going to be doing, as the towns did, because they were building their budgets while the economy was going haywire. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring that back around for the COLA to try to catch up, and also address what we're seeing in the future. Things aren't getting cheaper. Cost of living for our employees and your employees is not getting cheaper. And so to do that, we split 5% in January, that 2.5%, and went 5% in July, trying to play catch-up.
Any other questions?
Is there a county employees part of Main State Retirement or something else?
We have two programs. We have Main State Retirement, and we also have ICMA, the 457 program and the 401A program.
Just a quick question, Jim, on the, so you were talking about making sure that the salaries are competitive. And is that COLA on top of the increased salaries? They're happening simultaneously? No?
No, they happened in 2022.
Okay.
At the time, the commissioners had set aside some funds for us to implement the plan.
Okay.
And that was funded through the plan. And then this is being added on top of the new salary.
Okay. And what's the COLA proposed in FY '24?
23-24 is 5%.
Thanks.
But, and that COLA is across all non-union, whereas the merit is targeted towards certain positions, departments?
No, the merit is also targeted against all non-union. And just to
Okay.
give you an idea of what we're talking in terms of numbers, we probably have about 405, 410 employees total in the county. Non-union, we're probably about 120. So the majority of our employees are caught up in a collective bargaining agreement.
So what distinguishes the merit from the COLA if it's the same for everybody?
Maybe I'll jump in. I think when we're using the word merit, it is annual longevity step increase.
Okay.
It's a much smaller number than a real COLA, but it's just a little something for folks, as opposed to them waiting for a 5-year step.
Okay.
So it's a smaller number.
I spent,
Thank you.
I was gonna wait and jump in.
Yeah, I'm hung with it.
I spent 15 years on the school board before I went to the town council. And one of the things that just made me mad was these steps. Every year, teachers would get a step, just for sitting in the seats. And there was no merit, and they still get, they had their 3-year contract, and they're getting their contract increase plus a step, and, and I never, the justification for that always was over my head. It's like, wait a second, you're getting a raise. You shouldn't be getting something just because you're occupying a seat for another year. There should be something more tied to that. So, I'm not a big fan of steps. I am in favor of merit pay. Someone gets a designation or exceeds their job specifications or something like that. I think that merit pay is warranted, but just in general, steps are.
Yeah, when you did you were saying you did sort of you relooked at your classifications. Was this more of a survey, salary survey, or you just went out and sort of saw what are other people doing to try to give some sort of grade or something that's beyond this massive gap that nobody's really attaining to?
This was hiring a outside consultant.
To do, okay.
And we gave them the classifications.
Yep,
And they drew up a report.
gotcha, okay. Other questions?
One thing I'll just run down quickly, the operational side of my budget, you will see that I've taken a few decreases on that side. Under the 23-24 prelim, on transportation and lodging, professional services, legal services. That is all, we're trying to make a budget and get it under 6%, and so we're trying to clean up some of the areas and get to where we want it to be. So that's the reason why you'll see some of those lines that historically have been the same amount have gone a little south this year.
Gotcha. Any other thoughts on Jim's budget, on the executive piece? Moving on, either whichever you want to jump to, human resources, finance.
I think Alex has to go now.
Yeah, I think so.
My turn. So Finance Department, I'll just give a little bit of the backstory.
And before you jump it, pay,
Oh, boy.
just so people can,
87.
87. While you're on it, I appreciate that.
Back up a step. So this department is structured a little differently than it might otherwise be, just due to my position. About 5 years ago, we merged the assistant county manager with the finance director position, putting me in sort of a hybrid role where I'm a little of both. As a result, that's why you see a deputy finance director in there, who is more of the day-to-day stuff. And then from there, it's a 5-person department, including me. One of the people within the department, I need to change that title a little bit, is a person who shares, she comes out of the finance budget, but she shares a lot of her duties with HR. This finance department is as payroll-heavy a finance department as you'll ever see. Revenue collection is not a big part of what they do. Accounts payable, we do lots of it, but it's just pretty straightforward. But the payroll side of it, given that we've got 5 unions, that we've got a 24/7 operation with every shift differential under the sun baked into it, is really what drives this particular department. It's payroll, and we try really hard to stay on top of software trends and make use of it as much as possible. So that's sort of the big overview of it. And apologies if you've all heard me say that before, but it's different than a lot in that there isn't that tax collection end of things. It's much more geared towards the payroll end of it. So similar to what Jim had said, what you're seeing in there for salary changes are what's occurring when you're getting COLAs, but you're also getting, we're comparing 23, 24 against all the way back to 22. So we're skipping a half year, which is why you're always going to see bigger numbers in there, because we're skipping a year budget. We can't compare 23, 24 against 23 and a half. Well, we could, but you get a lot of useless numbers. So that's part of the struggle here on all of this. So that's the changes you're seeing there. This is another department we had. One of our staff members will be going up a step on the insurance, which is why you're seeing an increase in there. It's always great when they get married and have kids, but it does affect the health insurance on there. In terms of other changes, the only other real line that has a change on it, we've got 2 interesting ones. One, the maintenance contracts is going up a little bit. We're adding a cash management module to Munis, and we are beefing up our timekeeping attendance software. Again, this is us moving towards more and more utilization of software as much as we can handle at any given point in time. We're pretty much continuously rolling out something new. Right now, we're rolling out more automated time clock software throughout the whole county, and the current project of the week is getting our patrol deputies onto having it in their laptops every time they come in and out, which is.
What software do you use? Just gives
We use something called Attendance on Demand for the timekeeping. It's pretty robust, and it's definitely very handy in that one of the great features of it, again, is that as somebody puts in for time off, the process of them being granted that time off changes their schedule at the same moment in time. So the managers and everyone else can see the 2 occurring. You don't have to, look at the schedule, see if there's something on there, approve or deny the time off, then go back and change the schedule. It's all occurring seamlessly in one piece of software. And then it does a pretty good job of feeding that into Munis, which is our accounting software. And again, this is all super critical for us to keep running, largely because of the jail, because it in and of itself is a giant piece of it. And even though we're down on employees, we're not necessarily down on shifts being filled. So what we're getting is this smaller number of employees working huge hours, and every one of those shifts is its unique set of things. And this is software that does a good job of it. If somebody works a 16-hour shift, it knows, okay, that's a pay code 113 for the first 8 hours, that's 123. We have a pay code for after they go past 56 hours in a week, and it does a good job of all that. So we do recommend it. We are pushing the outer limits of it, I'll be honest, though. We are really, we were feeling like we're starting to see smoke come out of the server on it a little bit. So that's that piece of it. The other piece, there is a small increase on telephone and communications, and I just mentioned it, it's interesting. We are gonna be giving a small portion, a small amount to the finance staff as a reimbursement for cell phones. This is not something I thought we'd ever get to, but what is starting to occur, the banking that we're all doing remotely, and everyone in finance in some way is responsible for some portion of online transactions and approving ACHs. The days of the key fobs are going away. It's all an app on our phones now. So the first of the banks have started to require that of us. Welcome to the new world. That's the finance budget. Any questions?
Just go back one step to the payroll software you were talking about, where it's pushing its limits. It's a two-part question. One, if you're having those conversations, are you thinking that's something down the road that you'd have to change out? And if so, have you looked at how much changing out software is at this point? And what is that sort of price tag? Just curious what you're looking at on the horizon.
And yeah, so right now, AOD costs us roughly 20,000 out of that number that you're seeing there.
Okay.
So that $70,000 number, the remaining 50,000 is Munis, which I think I'm looking at a whole bunch of Munis users here. So, and that's always increasing. But Munis is the only game in sound for any entity, really of an in-between size. And very recently, Portland's even moved to Munis, which would be on the big side for Munis. But it's really the best game in town. Probably a doubling of that expense, though. Could go up to 40%. And we're not happy about it, but we are literally starting to see the smoke come out of AOD. And the issue that's coming up again is it does tie back to that needs of the new workforce, where there are always new things that people are proposing, that the unions are proposing, as they're always trying to get finer and finer in terms of getting that pay. And you need more robust software that's going to be able to handle those additional pieces. There are some good things to it. Again, the employees are really learning to love the fact that they can even use their phone to remotely put in for time off. And their supervisors are starting to really see the light that, oh, I don't have to go back to that giant spreadsheet. I pull up the piece of software and I can see it right then and there. It can project out, even if they're putting in the time off 2 to 3 months from now, it'll tell me what they're gonna have for time off 2 to 3 months out in the future. So it's great. We are pushing the limits a little bit.
Gotcha. So it's, at some
It's
point.
not this cycle. It's
No,
just-
it can't be. It's
No.
too much moving forward, but
Yeah.
you're going to want to bake that in at some point. Another question that I'll add to it, given the software that you may need to update, department-wise, any of the departments, do you offer remote work in any of the departments, and would that require a specific software if someone were to be remote for any reason?
My office is on a hybrid schedule.
Is it? Yep.
Because this building doesn't have another square inch that we can put a desk.
Right.
And so we have, our CDBG folks are working remote 2 or 3 days a week. Our compliance managers remote a couple of days a week. Our public health directors remote a couple of days a week. So, yeah, but they're working their 40 hours. It's just they're working a different place. We really don't have any impacts on stressing out the time clock based on people working remote.
remote.
Right. Does any of that remote hybrid require additional software that would have to be purchased for them to use off-site?
You know, it's really interesting. This sort of comes back to another one of those things that people said. You know, there's a lot of things about the pandemic that people didn't see the future correctly on, but one thing that I think a lot of folks said right out of the gate was, this is going to move workplace habits 10 years into the future like that,
Mm.
right? Like,
Mhm.
and it did it. And hats off to our IT director, who really moved well on the fly. And, you know, certainly a lot of us all had to shift to that 100% remote in a day. For finance, what we really discovered was, we didn't like it. We hated not being around each other,
Right.
but we could do it.
Okay.
And what we've landed on now is we do it as necessary. So we're in the office, but what we've had is that here's a great example. Our payroll, one of our staff members had COVID recently, a mild case that did not incapacitate this person. But they had their laptop at home, they cranked right on through. And this happened to be a particular position where they could do that. We do the same thing for snowstorms now. I just went through it the past few days when I couldn't get off the couch. Not COVID, bad back. So we've learned really as departments to embrace that flexibility where possible. Finance happens to be a department that can definitely do it as needed, but we lose a lot. We really,
Yeah.
that conversations in the office, we haven't figured out how to make up that one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel that. Absolutely. Well, thank you. Yeah.
But in short answer, yeah, I guess I can just say, yeah, we all have VPN.
All right, I'll just make, and really my question is, again, as you're thinking down the road, is maybe even next year, where do you bake in that conversation of software, and then as now everything is remote, does it require multiple shifts of things? It sounds like, for the most part, you've done the remote piece pretty well. The larger thing is gonna be the software that at the large end you'll need.
Pretty much every position, their replacement computer is a laptop now,
Right.
plus docking station.
Right,
Just-
and then everything's just thrown in there. Gotcha. All right, good. Other questions for this finance piece budget? All right, seeing none, I will turn to you.
Like Jim said previously, I have worked for Cumberland County for probably about 4 years, but not as the HR director. I just started. Our budget is pretty much the same. There hasn't been any significant changes. We do currently have one opening posted to replace me, and probably that should be filled in probably the next month, I hope. And so if there's any questions, I'm sure we can discuss it, but some of the only changes that we've seen is the safety coordinator was put under our department from facilities to human resources. So we're still kind of working through, the impacts of that. She's a professional and she has hit the ground running. She's terrific. But with that, there's always that unknown expense because you have somebody that really knows what she's doing.
Yep.
So some of those changes may come into the budget, but everything else has been pretty much the same.
Yep. Good. All right, committee, any other questions? I know I jotted some down, but open to any other questions that you have at this time.
I take it the phone piece is the exact same thing you just talked about with finance, basically, for resource.
Sorry, I missed the first part of that.
The phone piece, again, it's probably the exact same thing you were just talking about with finance. It's with human resource. Because if I'm looking at actual expenses, 691, budgeted request is 1541.
Yeah, I kept that flat from the prior year. I will take a look back to try to remember why that came in so low in 2021. We did upgrade and change out our method of allocating out phone expenses, and
No,
I'll come back to you on
yeah,
that.
it's not a huge number, it's just.
I would pull that up in Munis, but we're actually taking the dreaded upgrade
Oh,
to
yeah,
web-based
reboot,
as
huh?
of tonight,
Just
so.
Good luck tomorrow morning.
Oddly enough, it's so big that we're not even gonna be up tomorrow.
Oh, wow,
And
nice.
so we're down all the way through tomorrow and not up till tentatively Friday. And we are terrified.
Yeah.
Other questions? I'll throw this out. We'll just start at sort of the, on that page 39, this is where this question's coming from. You have 5 full-time employees that serve 505 employees. And you're saying that you're looking for adding a position that now is sort of, everything's sort of shifted. My overall question is, do you feel that it is difficult to conduct services with only 5 for 405? I mean, this is clearly a labor conversation, but does 5 work, or do you need another? Or as you're thinking about being able to do what you need to do for 405 employees, talk to me about the 5 that you have.
I would say, we have a very seasoned staff.
Okay.
You know, we don't have a lot of new people. I'm probably the newest, really. And so, my hope is with the candidate that I bring in, they'll be able to fill that gap and maintain what we're doing.
Gotcha. No, that's good. It's good when you have folks who know and can just
Yeah.
move things along. In terms of actual number, only number that jumped out at me is line 6515 under wellness. There was a shift from 2022 was budgeted 2,000, actually spent 7,000, but now the request is 2,000, and of course we're carrying it through. So this is sort of a flip from what I usually ask. You know, why the 2,000, but why 7,000 in a previous year? It says gym in each location. So just a little context of this, of that shift is all.
We are going to, so a few of those sort of cut in, we had a lot really crop up in 2021. Any excess, we are going to fund out of a separate employee advisory committee fund that has a little bit of money in it, and we're gonna use that for any excess here. So that's gonna cover, hopefully, any excess that goes into that.
Gotcha.
That's just us, spot where we've got a little tucked aside specifically for that use.
Right, you can trim here because you know you might have options there to some extent, right?
Correct.
Yeah, excellent. Committee, any other questions? Those were my major ones.
Somebody explain to me what Workforce Performance Solutions is?
That's our EAP group, Employee Assistance Program that we have. An employee assistance program that we have that's.
For the
local-
department or countywide?
Countywide, it's locally based in Maine.
Other questions? All right. Well, I'd say thank you for being here. Thank you for speaking. Welcome, and
very
looking
much.
forward to many years that you'll be continuing on, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now that we sort of went through all that, we're down to number 3. Jim, Alex, is there anything before we shift into that conversation of what we're talking about in future meetings? Anything else you wanted to pinpoint, highlight, mention?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay.
Feel like I've talked way too much.
Yeah, let me carry a little bit of burden here. So, committee, one of the things that I think we had done last year is we brought in specific department positions to talk about their budgets. We didn't bring everybody in, but we honed in on key ones. If you remember last year, I think we brought in 7 or so. I mean, there were some key ones. We did basically a whole night of that. I'm curious to hear if there are specific departments you want to bring in again this year. Is there none? This is sort of an opportunity just to sort of hear where you want to use the next 2 meetings and what we would do for that. And if Jim and Alex, you have ideas that you think would be good. I remember last year you gave some good advice on that too, but committee members' thoughts on that as we move forward?
I think the sheriff's office is always a big one.
Yeah.
Between the jail, I mean, that's the biggest portion of it, right? And then Cumberland County is always kind of the civic center, sorry, the
Cross
cross
insurance,
insurance.
yes. What? Who was that?
How long I've lived
Huh?
in this city.
I know
And
you're
still
talking
with bird ears too, just so you know. So, yeah, I think that's a good one, just because, I mean, as we're looking at the budget, you know, that's a tough one to forecast, so it's always good to hear from the director.
Absolutely.
Those would be the two I'd be.
Yep.
One thing I just want to inform you on, there won't be too much new information. Remember, we met in July.
Yeah.
And we went over the jail budget, we went over the cross-insurance arena budget, and we gave you an update on 6 months of the first 6 months of how the 2022 budget was going. So if we bring in cross-insurance and the jail again, there's not going to be any new information because they've already presented their budget for the
Fiscal year.
current year.
It's a good point, yeah.
The sheriff's office, absolutely.
Right.
Yes. But you're saying since we've really looked at cross-insurance throughout the year, I mean, and it also, again, I don't want to waste, the committee's time, but it is nice to have that connection because we go year to year. But you're right, there's no new information, so I'm not opposed to it, but I'll put an asterisk next to it.
Put a pin in it.
Yeah. Other thoughts, any other departments that would be worth bringing?
I guess go back to the sheriff's office just a minute, Dustin.
Mhm.
Is there any conversation ever been had about splitting the sheriff's department out from the jail administration and separating that? And thinking more lines of regionalization of policing and thinking that perhaps the sheriff's department can be either minimized or maximized. Again, I mentioned this last year, it seems to me that it just doesn't have any sense at all to station somebody out in Hopswell when you have to drive through Brunswick to get there. And, I would tell Brunswick, take it on, we're not gonna, encourage you to ever call the sheriff's department again. And I'm thinking about same thing with Cumberland, North Yarmouth, there's no need for the sheriff's department to, when you've got Yarmouth on one side and Cumberland on the other side. And I'd like to see those conversations, and again, this is not finance, this is probably big picture issues, but at the end of the day, it is finance.
Well, over the last 5-6 months, Travis Kennedy in my office and I have been having discussions with town managers across the county on public safety. And we sent out a survey about what the impacts, what are the town managers seeing as impacts to the public safety, and to rate them. EMS, of course, came in number 1, fire came in number 2, police came in number 3, FR 3. So there's a lot of desires by town managers to look into a different model for EMS and in fire.
Right.
And we just received the RFP in for a study that we're working with a small committee of town managers and fire chiefs right now to pick a vendor to do that study for us. But getting back to the survey, it really, the police side of things didn't really rise to the level of anyone wanting to talk in that direction at this time. They wanted to touch, they were hyper-focused on EMS, but also they were seeing fire as a possible item to look at too.
Well, yeah. We just need to encourage those conversations to get beyond we start and actually do something. But I would love to have the conversation with even though there's probably not a lot of new information, but the sheriff's department and the Cross Insurance Center, because I think on some level, we need to encourage them to, sometimes change their game and look at different things.
All right, I'm hearing a couple for cross insurance and sheriff's office.
That's all right, we'll bring Mike back in.
I mean,
Mike-
I think he
Mike would
likes
be
us.
happy to come back.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think he likes it here. I think he's all
That's a
right.
boring presentation, right?
Right.
You have to find out some new act before everyone.
Still waiting for tickets, but whatever.
Maybe that'll come this next conversation. Any other departments? I know there's a few other ones, but I'm assuming those two are the big ones, so, all right. Yeah,
Dustin, if I could, I would recommend the communications department.
I was gonna ask about that, yeah.
That's a large budget. It's an important service that they provide to 20 communities out of 28. And so I think Melinda would be happy to come to a meeting.
Yeah. Would the community be all right if we invited Melinda as well? Yeah. I'd be also curious, I really would be curious to hear some updates, because last year I know that there was a lot going on. I think even in the time of COVID, there was a increase in calls and conversations, so it'd be good to have that back.
Justin, can I make a recommendation?
Yep.
That when these ones, will come in, the sheriff and the CIA and the CCRC,
Yep.
instead of a Zoom, is an in-person. I think that would be more important, so that we can actually, I know, you don't wanna have another in-person, but the thing of it is, those are real big departments, and it's really hard, to get the clear picture is in that little square. But that's,
No,
I'm over here to make a suggestion.
I appreciate that. Community members, how do we feel about making that in person? I know that October 12th date, I know when we did these dates, we sort of were planning these out, but I'm curious, how would people feel if we did it in person?
I'm only coming from Gorham, so I'm fine either way.
Okay. Is that all right?
I'm in favor.
Okay.
I can do in person even though it's bridged.
We appreciate that. All right, so, thank you for that recommendation. So, Jim, Alex, is it all right if we do that? Will that work for you both as well? I don't want to, okay. At least that one in person. So, from what I'm hearing, Sheriff's Office, Cross Insurance Arena, CCRC, will do this in person. This will be for our next meeting for October 12th. Any other thoughts as that meeting is, anybody else we bring in? Good with that?
Well, in terms of size, I mean, you just hit facilities, which is one of the
Yep.
biggest ones. Then after that, the next two might be a little iffy. The district attorney's office is obviously a large one.
Mhm.
However, he's at the end of his term. So that would be a tough one.
Yep.
The other one is IT. While large, you did meet with him last year, and I don't think there'll be anything, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I didn't feel like there was much different, but unless
The
others.
only
felt
other
that.
one would be to maybe bring the deputy registrar of probate in, because probate is a moving target right now. They're seeing a lot of growth. We talked about revenue, but going up, but that would be the only other department.
I think three's.
You think-
I think, yeah, I think that's
I
fine.
did steal probate's thunder.
Yeah, you sort of
Yeah,
did, you know.
You gave a pretty good explanation of probate.
All those bombs were up to now, so no worries. But I think too, and we can always message you some questions too if things come up over the course of that time. So if there were
Exactly.
questions for probate that we needed answered before October 12th, I'm sure we could reach out. So there's that. That might save a little time. All right, so I have then three: Sheriff's Office, Cross Insurance, CCRC. We've been able to accompany the others, and then we're saying IT we're good with, probate we can reach out on, an emergency management agency. Any questions on that? I thought we were good there. Okay. I think we have our focus for the.
I just throw out one thing,
Yep.
and it's, I think it's tied together, facilities and capital improvement. I want to make sure that, as we talk about capital improvement costs, that we're tying that together with facilities and for, energy efficiency and any upgrades that we're making, even down to roofing products. It's, are we taking the opportunity to add more insulation to the roof at the same time? Or, what are we doing with air conditioning and heat pumps and more importantly, our energy use in general and again, it's, beat the horse,
No, actually, it's a great transition, Bob. I appreciate you saying that, because for me, so if we do all of those meetings on the October 12th, which will be in person, we have down also November 9th, this is under number 4, that's gonna be a 3 o'clock meeting. Will we be doing that Zoom? Do we feel that that's a?
I am not available, even though I had said originally I am not available for the November 9th meeting, so.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, 3 o'clock's gonna be a push to get out of work and get
Okay.
here. Yeah.
Well, it looks like it might be a wrap-up meeting, so maybe if we do a 5 o'clock and do it Zoom.
Well, I could probably do 3 o'clock on Zoom, I'm just saying to get in here for 3
Oh,
o'clock.
yeah, yeah.
Leave work,
No.
get here, you know, so
Right.
not in person on that.
No, I was thinking as well that that November 9th meeting was going to be Zoom anyways, but really was going to be what Bob's talking about, which is why I'm trying to segue what he's saying. It's a great opportunity to put all of our recommendations, future conversations, what we have specifically for budget. So where you're bringing that up, I think would be good to just solidify as a list on that last meeting. Not that we can't do it on the October 12th, but to make sure that we know what conversations we want sent out as we move forward. So that's why I was sort of getting back to what you're saying, but I hope that makes sense. But that would be a Zoom meeting to be able to do that, so, yeah.
And maybe we can split the difference and go 4 o'clock that afternoon on wrapping things up.
For the
The
November 9th.
magic time is like 7 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock. I have a commitment that
Yes,
night.
and that's why we tried to shift it back. So, just so, I know we've thrown out a couple of things. So on November 9th, would we be okay to start at 4 Zoom? And that would give plenty of time. I can't imagine going that long, but we are a talkative bunch, you know, so.
But the 12th of October would stay 5 o'clock.
Yes, that's gonna be 5 o'clock in this building again, in person, correct. Okay. Excellent. All right, before we adjourn, any other comments, thoughts, pieces? As always, thanks for everybody coming out. Jim and Alex, thanks for the presentation and guiding us through, and I'll look forward to our October 12th. Let me get a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Mr. Pratt motioned, Lee motioned, Bob seconded. I am gonna say there's probably no discussion, so all in favor? Carries unanimously. 5-0. All right, let's go home. Thank you all.
Does anyone have a parking that needs validation?
I gotta just look out.